Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Welcome up, Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Justin Lorber, and we are talking MLB Draft, which starts this Sunday. 3 days of Major League Baseball draft. 20 rounds is where we have landed. Justin, I know you've got a lot of things going on in your life, but you love the MLB Draft. How are you feeling about things as we're now a few days away?
Pretty good. I think the only part that's been really different, I think, with this draft from a Dodgers perspective compared to prior drafts is because their first round pick moved down 10 spots. They're not picking actually in the first round. It's technically a second round pick at 40th overall. There really haven't been a ton of names connected. Usually at this point, there'd be, 3 or 4 or even 5 mock drafts from, each different publication with guys, maybe connected or guys who would fit. And there just haven't been that many. So I think, we might be in for a surprise, which is always fun.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it. The Dodgers, as you said, they pick in the second round, 40th overall, because they went over the CBT last season with a $284 million payroll. That dropped them 10 spots from number 30 to number 40. They forfeited their own second-round pick by signing Freddie Freeman. They also forfeited a compensatory pick they would have received from the Rangers signing Corey Seager. So both of those picks are gone because of the Freeman signing. They end up with one pick in each round, beginning in the second round through the 10th round. They have $4.2 million is sort of their budget. And so I'd like to start with just big picture draft stuff. What kind of draft is this? Who are some names to watch? And then we'll get into the Dodgers at 40 and some guys that you've looked at in that range that maybe you like. But let's start big picture. Is this draft a college pitcher draft? Is this a college hitter draft? Is this a high school draft? How would you say this has generally fallen as we get to be just 4 or 5 days away?
I think at the top of the draft, this is a hitter draft. There's a reasonable likelihood that there are no pitchers in the top 10. There's I think a chance that there are no pitchers even in the top 15.
Wow.
I don't think that'll happen. I think someone probably in that 10 to 15 range will take a pitcher, but right now there are no pitchers who are, a lock or even close to a lock for being in the top 10. So we could see 10 or 12 hitters in a row, high school and college, to start off the draft. So that's college pitching and high school pitching. Dylan Lesko, who's the top high school arm, or at least was before he underwent Tommy John surgery. He was a guy who was probably, in that 5 to 10 range when he got hurt. Now maybe in that 10 to 15 range. But we'll see, for a team that doesn't really worry a ton about his timeline being elongated because of that, it's probably the most talented arm of the draft.
Overall, is this a especially strong draft? Is this a weak draft? Like, as far as when you look at the top 5 prospects, are these guys that are on par with top 5 prospects in previous drafts?
I think at least hitting wise, there's a lot of depth through that, first half or first 20 picks in the draft. I think teams picking in that range, they can get a pretty good college or prep hitter that can come in and be a top 5 guy in their system, in basically any system. And that's true at the top. Guys like Drew Jones and Elijah Green and Tamar Johnson and Cam Collier, Cam Collier is technically not a high school bat because he's in junior college, but he's high school age. So those 4 at the top of the draft, all likely top 10 picks, potential. If you're going based on talent, those could be, 4 of the 5 first names taken. But as we know, the MLB draft doesn't necessarily work that way. Yeah. And then there's a lot of college backs who are, really solid too. Brooks Lee, Kevin Parada, Jacob Berry, just to name a few. So I think offensively, this is a good draft to be picking, in the top half of the draft. Pitching wise, decent draft to be picking maybe in the back end and get one of the top college arms or a prep arm that falls. Yeah. I think overall, not like an exceptional draft, but not a terrible draft.
Are there any guys in particular that you like? I mean, you mentioned the guys that are at the top of the draft. Are those sort of the top guys on your board as you've done some, loose analysis of this? Are there any guys who have jumped out at you that you like?
You mean like specifically for the Dodgers pick? Or?
Just in general, not for the Dodgers, because I'm assuming the top guys in this draft obviously won't be anywhere near number 40.
Yeah. Okay. Guys I like a lot. Kevin Parada, who I mentioned earlier, he's a catcher at Georgia Tech, who's a Southern California product. But he was in the draft 2 years ago, went to school. He's a draft eligible sophomore. Maybe he doesn't end up at catcher, but the dude just hits, and he hits for power. And he's going to go in the top 10, and a team is going to be really happy that they get him, whether he ends up at left field or right field or first base or catcher or a mix of all of those. He's just going to hit. And I think I'm going to mispronounce his name, but Cooper Herpe, H-J-E-R-P-E, Oregon State pitcher. Really, really unique approach from the left side. I think he's probably the best pitcher in the draft. If you're looking at things more from like an analytical, progressive perspective, those are the teams that are going to be really high on him. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first pitcher off the board, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he is, the fifth pitcher off the board and goes in like the mid-20s.
Okay, we love the Oregon shout out up here, in Portland. Go Beavs. I'm a Ducks guy, but hey, baseball, the Beavs are a lot better than we are. Let me ask you about two names because they're interesting names, I think. And again, we'll get into the Dodgers. Kumar Rocker, a guy who was an elite prospect a year ago, did not sign because of some concerns. He's back in the draft. Sort of a bizarre story there. And then the other one who's just sort of a name that circulates on Twitter is Tennessee pitcher Ben Joyce. He throws around 105 miles an hour. Where are you at on those two guys? Where might they expect to hear their names called?
So Kumar Rocker, yeah, obviously a very big name, someone that I think even, casual fans who don't follow college baseball probably know who he is from the last few years. I don't think he goes as high, and I don't think there's really anyone who expects him to go as high as number 10 last year. And even then, that was a little bit of a drop from where, he was being mocked. He was being mocked in like the, 5, 6, 7, 8 range. And, look, obviously there's a ton of arm talent there. I think, again, from a pitch metrics perspective, probably a guy who might be a little overrated just because he's so noteworthy. Okay. People think of Kumar Rocker, at least they did last year, as like, oh, this guy's the best pitcher in the draft. He wasn't even the best pitcher on his own team. That was Jack Leiter. But he's still a first-round arm. And he's come back. He's pitched for an independent lead team. He's made a couple starts for them in the last month or two. I don't know exactly when. But he's worked himself into that first-round range where I think it's likely, a team in the back half of the first round or maybe the comp round takes him. One fit I see there is with the White Sox, especially. I think that would be a good fit for them because they're not as progressively minded. So I don't think they'd be turned off by some of that stuff. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not where I lie on the progressive traditional spectrum, but I think that's probably a good fit there for Rocker. We'll see if it works out. And then second name, Ben Joyce. Yeah. I love Ben Joyce. I think he's awesome. I think, and now look, the caveat here is the stuff is truly elite. This is an 80+ grade fastball.
Yeah.
If you put him in the major leagues right now, just from a stuff perspective, it would be one of the best fastballs in baseball, if not the best fastball in baseball. It's that good. His slider's good. Now the thing is here, a team's probably going to take him early just because it's so good, and you can realistically throw him in a major league pen right now and have him pitch high leverage innings. But he wasn't worked super hard at Tennessee. So, again, probably fits on a playoff team that wants a reliever. But I don't know if he's a guy who you can count on to pitch, back-to-backs in the playoffs and have that same stuff for even 3 nights in a row if you have a game 3, 4, and 5 or 3 games in 4 days, because he wasn't really doing that at Tennessee. But the Dodgers were to take him at 40, it's probably a little bit of an overdraft, especially for a guy who's going to be a reliever only in the bigs. But his stuff is that good, and it's you're getting a guy who just unmatched in terms of arm talent and stuff in college in the last decade or whatever.
Well, Daniel and I just did our trade deadline preview and said, hey, they need relief pitchers. They need relief pitchers. They need relief pitchers. I mean, I'm not, look, we've seen guys move quickly. I'm remembering Paco Rodriguez for the Dodgers. He was up the next year. Obviously, the idea that somebody would make the jump immediately from the draft to the major leagues is pretty crazy. But as you say, I mean, the guy's throwing 105.5 mile an hour fastball. Who knows? I'm not saying the Dodgers will do it, but it's interesting. So let's get to the Dodgers then briefly here. It's number 40. It's obviously incredibly difficult to project what's going to happen. 39 picks ahead of them, and then who's going to be around. But as far as the names that are in that range, as you said, there's not a lot of chatter because they're picking so late about who they're connected to. But who are some guys that you like that could fall in that range that if when you and I are on here on Sunday night talking about the first draft, the first day and how the Dodgers did, you'd be happy if that was the name the Dodgers called?
Yeah, so I want to preface this with just a little bit of like meta game preview on the draft, because ultimately I think in most other sports, which are the more highly publicized drafts, people are used to, okay, well, it's not like in order of the best players, but it's like the best players with like some accounting for team fit. Baseball, because of the way the draft is set up and the budgetary restraints, it is, you have your picks and this is where you take guys, but you also have this much money to spend, and the money is a huge factor. And what the Dodgers did last year in a similar situation, not having the second round pick, but they were picking at 29 and not at 40. They went under slot in the first round with Maddox Bruns, and then went over slot in the third round with their next pick with Peter Hubert, both high school arms. And so I wonder, with the smallest bonus pool this year and picking at 40 compared to 29 last year, but basically the same setup, do they go under slot and, try to make the most of their money, try to stretch it out a little bit more to some of those later picks and snap up some more talent like we know they like to do? Or do they say, well, we picked once in the first 100 picks, we just got to go get the best guy on the board? Based on how they acted last year, I think it's more likely it's the latter, but it really just depends who's on the board when they're there. But that's kind of the background of like, what kind of decision are they going to make? I think those are like the two dichotomies that they might be picking between, but again, it's really player specific. And into a couple players, there haven't been a whole lot of connections because most mock drafts don't go up to 40. As we've gotten closer to the draft, there have been more. Kylie McDaniel, who's over at ESPN, he put out a mock draft, I think it might have been last week, with the most substantive connections that I've seen to pitchers like Oklahoma's Cade Horton, Arkansas's Peyton Pallett, and LSU commit and junior college pitcher Jacob Misiorowski. And Misiorowski was also named as not a connection, but a fit by Keith Law over the Athletic. I think all of those three would be a fit. Horton was a two-way player, still is a two-way player, but his future is definitely on the mound. He had a huge College World Series, probably bumped himself up from like a guy who is probably heading back to school to a guy who could go in like the middle of the first round.
Wow.
Huge College World Series, elite slider, mid to upper 90s velocity. I think he has put himself in a position where he probably goes before the Dodgers pick, but wouldn't be surprised to see the Dodgers take him. Peyton Pallett, who's over at Arkansas, he was getting Walker Buehler comps even before he underwent Tommy John surgery. Similar frame, like he's kind of like this smaller framed, wiry right-hander from the SEC with a quick arm, mid-90s fastball, curveball with a very high spin rate, upwards of 3,000 RPMs usually. So wouldn't be surprised to see them take him. Jacob Misiorowski, the dude is just a freak. He's 6'7". He's got an upper 80s slider, upper 90s to triple digit fastball. And despite like the height, it comes out of a low release. The pitch metrics are good. So he's a guy from a physical perspective. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Dodgers take a shot on him. As kind of like the athlete with stuff that they like in their pitchers.
Last year, they took basically all pitchers. I mean, like every guy you just mentioned is a pitcher. And again, I know you're not, it's a more difficult task than it has ever been to project. But do you think philosophically that's just a coincidence, or is that something the Dodgers might be intentionally saying, we're just going to target pitching?
I think last year it had something to do with the 2020 season being wiped out, and you lose all that data that you can gather on hitters, especially college hitters. You lose the majority of a season's worth of data that you can gather on hitters and pitchers. It's just easier to kind of understand or evaluate pitchers based on, lesser numbers of appearances. I think that's where they were at, and I don't know that for sure, but it seemed to me that it had something to do with the 2020 draft cancellation, and also just where they're at with pitching. Their pitching development, I think, has overtaken their offensive development as the stronger side. And obviously, both are very good, but the talent that they've accumulated in the last 2 drafts, and in trades, and in minor league signings like Yency Almonte and Evan Phillips, guys off waivers, what they've been able to do from a developmental perspective on the pitching side, from the lowest levels of the minor leagues all the way to the major leagues, I think it's been really good. They know that that's a strength for them, and of course, it's not like offensive development is a strength for them,
right?
But pitching development's really good, and pitchers are fun.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, Justin, we appreciate it. As I said, Justin and I are going to be back here. We're recording Sunday. Might go live, might not. But Sunday or Monday, be on the lookout for a video from Justin and I breaking down whoever the Dodgers do pick at number 40. That's their only pick on Sunday night. And then they come back. I believe it's rounds up through round 10 is on Monday, and then rounds 11 through 20 is on Tuesday. Is that right, Justin?
Yeah, that sounds right. 1 and 2 Sunday night, 3 through 10, and then 11 through 20.
Okay, and MLB Network will have a bunch of coverage. Obviously, this is all sort of looped into the All-Star Game week, which is kind of a cool deal. So MLB Draft, again, starts Sunday. Dodgers' first pick is number 40. That's the lowest their first pick has been since 2005. They took Luke Hookover in that draft and did not end up signing him, I believe. And so hopefully they get a little bit more luck this time around. That's Justin Lorber. You can check out all his stuff at Future Dodgers on Twitter, futuredodgers.com. Tons of prospect content and all sorts of stuff there. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Again, check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest Dodger Blue 1958 on social media. And, of course, make sure you subscribe, ring the notification bell here as well. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.